Welcome to the Morning Glory Project, Stories of Determination. I'm your host, Betsy Graziani Fassbinder. Like in nature, we see determined flowers and vines clinging to life and seeking light. So are Morning Glory people. And in this podcast, I'll interview writers, activists, artists, entrepreneurs, survivors and thrivers, and trailblazers of all kinds. These are folks that have been determined to get over, under, around, and through the obstacles that face them, or to seize the opportunities that come before them. I find these people inspiring and amazing. I know you will too. So welcome to Meredith May, author of The Honey Bus. I should let you know that I became acquainted with Meredith not first in person, but through her pages in this gorgeous book, and the subtitle of which is A Memoir of Loss, Courage, and a Girl Saved by Bees, which is an intriguing enough title. So welcome, Meredith. I'm so glad you're with me and glad to be talking with you today.
Thank you, Betsy.
So can you start by telling me a little bit about the beginnings of this story? What were the circumstances that led you to write this memoir? And what were the circumstances that were the beginning of the launch in early childhood with your family and living with your grandparents?
Oh, okay. I'll start with the story of my childhood because that sort of lays the foundation of the plot of the book. And then I'll talk a little bit about why I wanted to tell the world about it.
Sure.
My parents divorced when I was 5. We were living in Newport, Rhode Island because my father was in the Navy. They were in their 20s, but they met in Monterey, California. And my mother was extremely volatile woman. I remember a lot of screaming. I remember dishware flew a lot. She would rip curtains down off the rods when she got mad. And as a very small child, I learned to keep my back against the wall and my eyes on my mother constantly. And so it was after one of these huge fights that I found myself not long after on an airplane with my mother and my baby brother. And when the plane landed, we were in California and we were moving into my grandparents' home in Carmel Valley, and specifically into my mother's childhood bedroom with my mother. So I shared a bed with her. My brother had a cot at the foot of the bed, and that was our living arrangement for the next decade as my mom just tumbled into an irreversible depression.
Oh, that had to be so hard, from having your back against the wall and your eyes on your mom to then sharing a bed. Had to be quite a difficult transition.
Yeah, but I think and people ask me questions like that a lot, but that is an adult interpretation of it. As a kid, you just love your mom and you don't know that your mom is different than other moms at that age. Like you don't understand that that's abnormal. So you live with it. And so that was, kind of a trick writing the book as an adult, trying to keep in that child mind and write it that way. So, yeah. So that's sort of the plot. And my father was never mentioned again. So it's as if I lost my parents overnight, and I gravitated toward my grandfather, who was this eccentric mountain man, and he had over 100 beehives tucked into the remote canyons of Big Sur. And so I just became his sidekick, and that was my escape. And he taught me a lot about sort of the family structure inside a beehive. And that sort of gave me the missing model.
So what really struck me as I read this story is how the bees and everything you learned about them, as well as your relationship with your granddad too, seemed to provide the architecture of family in a way that you didn't already have it, or in a way that it didn't yet exist for you because your family was so fractured and your mom was so fragile.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from bees? What was it that you got?
Just to your point, exactly, like bees famously put chaos into order, right? And they've been doing it for 100 million years, and they haven't really changed the way they do it. And they've sort of perfected the art of family, right? So in a way, bees are the opposite of dysfunctional family. They're so first, just the order of them, the symmetry of their comb, the routines they have calmed me down. And then just the art of beekeeping is a very meditative process, and you can't move quickly or have you make loud noises. You have to. It's very zen. It's like, I compare it to scuba diving underwater. You have to move slowly to conserve your air. You have to move slowly around bees because they sense your agitation. They sense your mood. They don't like sudden movements. They don't like shadows over their top of their frames. So you just have to be super gentle, also so you don't get stung. You have to watch where you're putting your hands and brush them aside. So the movements of beekeeping were like a qigong for me, I guess.
Well, they were so much the opposite. Well, let me say it differently. The chaos in your own family was also something that you seemed to need to quiet. So you struck me in your pages as a still and quiet girl that kind of observed and tried to get things to settle. And it seemed like the bees were in harmony with your inner nature too, that you were craving that in your family, and that you were kind of like that.
Yes. No, that's so spot on. And I'm pausing a bit because I'm always amazed that readers are picking this up in the book, because yes, my grandfather was a very calm person as well. And I gravitated toward that because, when you grow up in a family like mine as a kid, you become very precocious. You study adults, right? Because you want to stay safe and you want to make sure, is mom in a good mood today, or should I not approach today? And I think it's no wonder I became a journalist, a newspaper journalist, because I'm a very good observer. I blend into the wall and I notice a lot of things. I study behavior. It's almost like a sociologist. And I think that, back to your point about beekeeping, like, not only did it get me out of the house, we lived in Carmel Valley, and I would be with my grandfather all day in Big Sur. So it was quite literally an escape. But also watching how the bees treat one another. I was learning lessons about compassion and love and family loyalty. And I'll give you an example because it's kind of esoteric if you don't know bees. But for example, the queen is the only bee in the hive that can lay eggs, but she can't feed herself or keep warm at night. And she relies on her worker bee daughters to, surround her at night and keep her warm, and to bring her water droplets and to bring her nectar. Otherwise, she would die. So there's this mother-daughter bond that's vital to the survival of the colony. And I think as a little girl, I needed to see creatures, doesn't matter, human or animal, putting themselves second to their children, because I didn't have that. And I needed to know that that existed in the world, and that helped me understand that maybe my situation was not the norm. And it taught me what to do when I became an adult, because I wasn't getting those lessons.
Well, it's funny as I hear you describe it, because I hear it in two ways. In one hand, the queen bee requires her daughters to take care of her, and in a way, that's what your mom required of you. No, so in a way, it was an echo of the model in your own household, and at the same time, there was what was different about the bees is that they had a mutuality,
right?
It was for the mutual benefit of the hive, as opposed to
narcissistic. Yeah, the queen is not narcissistic. She's giving something in return for the care that, which is how a mother and daughter should be. They should make each other happier and thrive.
Tell me about some of the most difficult moments when you were sharing that room with your mom and your brother. Why was it still hard there? Because you were in the company of your grandparents, you had your grandfather, you had some escape. Why was it continually to be a challenge? I'll let you explain that to those who've not yet read the story?
Because as a little girl, you want your mother. You want your mother present. And she was in bed. She didn't get out. She was highly depressed. My grandmother's main concern was taking care of my mother. So, my grandmother would bring her meals to bed, would fetch her books from the library. And, bless her heart, was trying to take care of my mother, but was sort of amplifying my mother's weakness. And, I wanted my mom to come to my baseball game or come to school and see my art project. I mean, you want to be like the other kids. And so that was difficult, but it was compounded by the fact that my mother occasionally would get out of bed, like maybe to go bowling on a parents without partners date or to go square dancing, or occasionally would come out of bed to go to a garage sale. And I would think, oh, she's okay now, she's back. But inevitably something would set my mother off about the world, like someone wouldn't signal on the road, or, in little minor things, which just turn into huge conflagrations. And she would sometimes become physically violent with me and angry. And so, yeah, it was, she was so volatile and unpredictable. It made it really hard. So there are a few scenes in the book where she comes after me.
Mm. And those are frightening scenes, because what you've done so beautifully in the book is you have met that goal of being in the child's mind. And so as a reader, we're with you as children, in our own vulnerability, and how scary that is for kids. So Meredith, I'm curious what, in addition to bees, or what specifically about the bees helped you to survive this that you were going on, what you took into adulthood. And so I think you have a short reading for us that gives us a hint as to the beginning of this.
Yeah, I think, my story would be a terribly depressing book if it weren't for my grandfather, who was the counterbalance to all of this. I mean, he was completely generous, kind, wise person. So the book really is a Valentine to my grandfather. And the paperback comes out in March, and we're changing the cover. Right now on the cover is his army bus, which was a World War II army bus that he had gutted. It was in our backyard, and he turned it into his honey processing factory.
So the honey bus is quite literally a bus.
Oh, yeah. He called it the honey bus. Yeah. And it's this World War II, late 40s bus. But the cover is going to be switched to a picture of him. And that's because readers have had such a strong reaction to him in the book that we're kind of going with that.
Oh, wonderful.
So this is a scene about the first time I made honey with him in the bus.
Let me, for people who have not read it, you didn't get the honor of going on the bus right away. You were a little kid, and there was lots of stuff in there. And I'm sure that he had his cronies in there that he did these things with. So you kind of had to earn your keep, did you not, or earn your way onto the bus in some ways by learning about the bees and showing that you could handle it.
I mean, he was teaching me respect and patience. And this bus, you kind of have to understand, he built the whole processing factory inside out of old spare junk in the yard and powered it with an engine he ripped out of a lawnmower. And it was like not OSHA approved or safety checked. And he would say, it's too dangerous, you'll lose a finger. And he actually had a finger, the missing one digit that he lost as a kid in woodshop class, but he would always show me his finger. He's like, you're going to lose a finger. And that worked, I waited. But no, I'm finally old enough. He made me wait for about a year so that I would be good once I got in and not touch things.
And so you're how old here?
So I am about 6 or 7. So we're waiting for the honey to come bubbling out of some plumbing pipes that are suspended from the ceiling of the bus. Okay. Here it comes, Grandpa said. The first rivulets of honey bubbled out of the pipes and cascaded into the holding tanks. It was pretty, like a girl's blonde hair undulating in the wind. I remembered Grandpa told me once that one bee makes less than a thimbleful of honey in its whole life. So much was spilling out now that it must have taken a million bees to make it all. We worked all day until the sun started to sink behind the Santa Lucia Range, turning the mountains from dark green to gray until we had nearly 100 gallons of honey. I lost myself in the movements of lifting frames and slicing wax, and imagined we were worker bees inside our own hive. The whir of the extractor sounded like the hum of a colony, drowning out our voices, so we had to communicate mostly by hand gestures. We nudged each other in this direction or that, shaking one another by the shoulder to convey something important. If we were at either ends of the bus, we had to wave and dance like a bee to get the other's attention. Grandpa cut the motor, and with the last rays of the sun, and even after the bus shuddered to stillness, my ears continued to ring. My arms ached and my throat was dry. We had slight wax sheens on our hair and skin, and we smelled of butter and sage. I had never worked so hard that my body felt asleep before bedtime. Grandpa lifted the gate at the bottom of the holding tank, held an old mayonnaise jar under the spout, and filled it with honey. He reached for a roll of square white labels with red lettering and slapped one on the jar. Wildflower honey, U.S. choice, from the Big Sur apiaries, E.F. Peace. Here you go, he said, handing me the jar. You made that. The honey glowed in my hands like a living, breathing thing. It was warm, and I loved it because it made sense when nothing else did. It was a pure example of what Grandpa had been trying to explain inside the bus, that beautiful things don't come to those who simply wish for them. You have to work hard and take risks to be rewarded. But he wasn't exactly correct when he said I alone made the honey. Both of us had harvested it, but the bees made it. They'd collected nectar from millions of flowers to make this one small pound of honey in my hands. All of us, humans and insects, in our separate ways, had traveled far, navigated dangers, and labored to exhaustion for a shared obsession. We made this honey because we believed we could.
Wow, thank you for that. It sounds so magical in lots of ways, what you experienced in that little bus. And really, I mean, nature is such a magical thing, and bees certainly the magicians among them all. So it's a beautiful moment. I want to go back to what you were saying about sort of being that observer and being able to blend in. In addition to this beautiful memoir, you of course have been a journalist for a very long time, and have won the Penn USA Literary Award for Journalism, and you were shortlisted for a Pulitzer Prize, all of those things. So I wonder, what was it for you that makes you such a good observer? What do you think you bring to those moments? Because I know that when you step into the human hive, there are lots of interactions and distractions and things that may pull at your heartstrings or make you afraid. So how is it that you're able to tap into that kind of observer self? Where do you think that comes from?
Oh, well, I think it comes from trying to figure out my own world after it just got completely upended when I was 5. So I was trying to, I was a kid, I used to spy a lot. I would be around the corner listening to the adults. I mean, I did it in Rhode Island. I would spy on my parents to try to figure out what they were fighting about. Mm. And then I would try to spy later on my granny and my mother to try to figure out why Dad wasn't coming to get us, because they would have hushed conversations in the bedroom with the door shut. So, and then I would also hide a lot just to kind of think. And, I would climb this huge eucalyptus tree in the front yard that was full of bees, or I would climb under the bed, or I even got in the clothing hamper and shut the door. I mean, I was kind of like a cerebral, sort of moody kid. And I think those parlay well into journalism. Like I think that made me a very observant person and a really good listener.
Sure. And
one of the things that I did, I worked in newspapers for 25 years, most of those at the Chronicle. I would just have conversations with people. I wouldn't necessarily have a list of questions and to go from one to the others. I would just ask the person, where can we hang out that's comfortable for you, or so I can see you in your natural habitat, whatever it is that the person's known for. So if I were interviewing me, I would say, hey, can we go to the bees, and can you show me your bees? And then I'm just having conversation with the person as they're opening their hive, and they're not even actually feeling interviewed.
Just sort of the organic conversation of it.
Mm-hmm. Just hearing what they're saying underneath what they're saying. Is what I tried to do.
The undercurrent of the message said, well, that was the training that you got as a kid, right? You know, families that have secrets make little spies of their children, right? And I often wonder how many, I know that many writers come from families where they were the secret uncoverers or the history documenters. But I also know investigators and policemen and people that have professions where they have to snoop and spy often also come from those backgrounds. So Meredith, one other little tack I'd like to take it here is to generalize this, because not everybody in a dysfunctional family is going to have a grandpa that keeps bees, of course. So I want to take that a little further. I'm wondering, given the nature of your mom's family and your brother and how difficult that was, I'm sure that it left some marks on who you are. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what decisions you've made even in adulthood and practices do you employ to continue your own healing and your own growth and your own becoming the full round person that you are?
A lot of people helped my brother and me coming up beyond grandpa. And these were parents of our schoolmates. Both my brother and I, can name 3 or 4 adults that cooked dinner for us regularly, or took us camping with their family, or taught us how to fix an engine, or taught us how to hit a baseball. We found it in other places. And one of the beautiful things with having the book come out is those people, a few of them are actually in my book, but they're reading the book, and then they're reaching out to Matthew and my brother, and saying, I thought something was off, and, I'm really glad that I was there for you. And so throughout my life, I have been very good at finding the help I need and finding alternative family. And there are so many people that help me, teachers and editors at newspapers, and even other writers who wrote books that were instrumental in helping me figure out how to write a book myself. And other writers who did me a solid and introduced me to their agent with, things like that. So I've had a lot of help, and the task for me as I got older is to realize, to stop trying to ask for so much help, actually, and to learn how to give it to others. And I think that for me is the most joyous thing right now, is that I'm helping other people through teaching. And then also I have a few people I mentor that I've just chosen to help because they astounded me in some way. They didn't ask for my help, but they reminded me of me when I was their age.
Oh, that's lovely. It makes me think of Mr. Rogers, right, who said, find the helpers. You've done that, and now you've become that. It's very touching and exciting to hear.
I loved that documentary about
Me
him.
too.
Oh,
Me too.
God, I was weeping. Yes.
Me too. And I've seen it twice, and I sobbed both times. So we've established that you and I are both weepy willows here, and that's not necessarily
As I get older,
a bad.
I cry more.
Me too. Well, all kidding aside, maybe it wasn't so safe to cry in your youth, and now it's safer to feel all that. So
right.
My last question here is sort of, what has it been like both writing the book now, and you hinted at what it's been like for it to be out in the world, and how might that have continued to help you in your own growth process?
I love speaking to a crowd about the book, because I especially love the Q&A part, because that is a really, it's such a healing process for me to answer other people's questions, either about writing, but sometimes questions come up about mental illness or family. And, I always start the Q&A period with like, okay, I wrote a memoir. All bets are off. You can ask me anything, because writing a memoir, come on, you put it out
taking
there.
Your clothes off in public, right?
Yeah, exactly. I say the same thing. I feel like I'm standing in my underwear in the grocery line all the time. But I really, really like it because it feels like I carried around this secret of this dysfunctional family with me all the way up until this was published. And it's hard. It's hard to be with your girlfriends after like my rowing team. And then we go get coffee after, and everyone's talking about, oh, it's Mother's Day coming up. What are you going to do for your mom? And you all go around the table, and it gets to me, and there's this like clunk. It's hard, and you don't have the time in that moment to explain. And it's just like pass. But now that this is out there, it's fully explained. And it's as if I was carrying a bag of sand. And then every time someone comes to me and says, your book really helped me, I have a toxic mom too, or I now know what my daughter's going through because I'm getting a divorce, or whatever, it just really moved me. I love bees now. It's like they each take a grain of sand out of my bag, and my weight's getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And that's the beautiful thing about this.
What a lovely way to say that. Well, I know that many people will find themselves in these pages, even if their circumstances are wildly different than yours, because any kid who's ever had a parent, or an absent parent, or a divorced parent, or an abusive parent, or mentally ill parent will gravitate toward this. And I also feel really strongly that people will get excited about the mission that you have, really, or the mission I assume you have, which is about saving bees on the planet, and how crucial they are. That this book is a story of your family, but it's also a story of how crucial and elemental these creatures are to our existence.
Yes.
And so I wonder if there's a cause or an organization that you might recommend that people should know about in terms of preserving bees, or practices that we might employ to help do that as well.
Oh, thank you for asking me that. Yes, the easiest thing to do is plant native wildflowers where you live, and everywhere else. Like we need flowers the bees need flowers in unusual places, like on top of roofs in cities, in medians, on roads, and you can get those seed balls. They're like little round balls of mud with native wildflowers in them, and you can just toss them like
Really?
big guerrilla wildflower planters. Just go drive around and throw them everywhere.
Oh, good.
It's the main thing. That's the easiest thing to do. I realize not everyone has the time to be a beekeeper, nor should they, but just go to Xerces Society, XERCES, Xerces Society. I'm looking it up to find out what the natives are in you can do by zip code. Yeah.
And it's called a seed ball that we can toss out, right?
Yeah, a seed ball.
That would be so fun to let your kids toss one of those out the window on the freeway. Wow, that'd be big fun.
Yeah, just be careful where you throw on it. But yeah,
of course. Well, maybe not on the freeway.
Right. Maybe the country road.
There we go.
When I talk to little kids, I always bring a big basket of them and pass them out. It's xerces.org is Xerces Society. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it's a science-based nonprofit that can help you figure out. It's all about, conservation and natives.
Well, perhaps we'll be helping folks to help populate the bee, or rejuvenate the bee population and being here.
Yeah.
Meredith, thank you so very much for being part of this Morning Glory project, and for indeed being a Morning Glory person. A Morning Glory is a determined vine that seeks the light and wants to bloom beyond whatever darkness or rubble or hazard it has to climb over or under, around, or through. And you've certainly done that, and this book is evidence of that. I wish you every kind of success with it, and with your other endeavors as well. Thank you for being a part of the Morning Glory project.
Oh, this was tons of fun. Thank you.
Meredith May's story is so touching to me, not only because it's the story of a vulnerable child, but because it was also the story of how someone can step in as a parent in a way when there are impaired or absent parents. I wrote about that in my own story about, I never liked the term stepmother, but I love the term step-in mother. And in Meredith's case, she had a step-in grandfather and a few 100,000 honeybees that also taught her a lesson. I'm reminded of the quote by Catherine McKennett, who said, "Now every time I witness a strong person, I want to know, what dark did you conquer in your story? Mountains do not rise without earthquakes." And Meredith is one of those people that at first glance looks as though she's always been just fine, but we often have to look beyond that. She is definitely a morning glory who used nature and the love of a grandfather to sew together the pieces of her own happy childhood out of pieces that were missing too. Thank you for listening today to the Morning Glory Project, Stories of Determination. If you've enjoyed this story or others, I welcome you to go on to where you subscribe to podcasts and subscribe so you get us regularly each Wednesday. And if you've enjoyed this and other episodes, give us a like or a positive review. It sure does help. Thank you for listening to the Morning Glory Project. Go out and bloom.